Hello, hello. So, I guess this is a conversation between us. You do know each other. So, André, my first question was, what was sort of the genesis of this particular book? You've written short stories before.
Some,
but
not many.
Not many. I mean, the Enigma variations,
yes,
they're loosely connected stories, but it has one narrator.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah. The origin of this book is really because Audible asked me, "What are you working on?" And I said, actually, at this moment in time, I'm not working on anything. What do you have in mind? And so this was somebody at Audible, and he said, "What do you think you want to write?" And so I told him, I'm writing this story about this man who has special gifts, etc., and I'm trying to do something with magical realism. So he said, "Oh, that sounds exciting, and where is the story going?" And I told him, and he liked the idea. And the next thing I know, I'm writing the story. I'm in Italy, which is also an advantage because you're in the very streets that you're describing. And the next thing I know is that they're doing it, and what's his name? Luigi Ballerini, not Luigi Ballerini, but Eduardo Ballerini, his son, is reading it in perfect English, but he knows Italian. So I'm in heaven, and I want to do more. So I did more.
So that was your first story?
Yes.
Right. And that is the man from
Peru, the gentleman from Peru.
The gentleman from Peru. I see. So, and then the second story, there's two people who meet.
Yes.
While they're on jury duty.
That's correct.
Which is something that we all try to get out of.
You think they don't want to get out of it?
Yeah, no, they will. It's funny because as soon as I opened this book, I had just finished
jury duty?
My jury duty this season. I was.
You were stuck?
I was selected.
Impaneled. Okay.
And yes, and I could not raise my hand to object, and I was on a criminal trial.
Oh.
And I somehow, because of process of elimination, became the jury foreman too.
Oh, jeez.
And and it was a very upsetting trial or whatever, but it was quite an experience. So I was very interested to read that there's I guess a love story that
can burgeon even in that setting.
In that setting. So tell me about that.
Well, I wanted to write a story about two elderly people who essentially find that they still are not done with living.
Right.
And that on top of that, there's a spark between them, that they decided it's not really a good idea to undo that spark. I don't want to give away the story.
Right.
But it was lovely to write because it's very hopeful. And I will eventually, at some point tonight, I will read a part of the story because I think it ends in a way that for me was absolutely unexpected and miraculous.
Yes.
I shouldn't say that because I always put down whatever I write, but...
Well, I was really involved, I mean, beyond the jury duty aspect of it, because it takes place over a series of days.
Yes. And you know what you do in jury duty, the first thing you do is you want to have lunch with people.
Right.
And so you have lunch with the same person, and then the next time, shall we do the same thing? Yeah, why not? Let's do the same thing.
Right.
And you have lunch at the same stupid rinky-dink place.
Right.
If you're laughing, that means that you've been to those places. and of course, you don't care. You just, your life is on sort of pause.
Right. But the whole idea that you haven't lived the life that maybe you could have lived.
Yes.
That's something that is throughout different stories that you've written.
It's all about what I write. It's about the other life, the unlived life, the might have been life, the kind of life that you think you were owed and you never got it.
Right. Is there anything that you think of, well, I should have been this or I should have done that?
Well, it's funny because There was a moment when I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was walking down the street, and I said, you know, I'd love to live in that place. It must be wonderful to live in that place. 2 years later, I found there was a sublet in that very place. I didn't know the place because I never looked at the address. But sure enough, it was that place. And I said to myself, you wanted this, now you got it. Okay, now live with it. But the most important thing was that there are many things in life that we come very close to and we don't get. And yet you think that, oh, I should have gotten that. Why didn't I get that? But that is what life is.
Right. And what about your vocation? Do you feel that way, what you chose to do with your life?
No, because my vocation is also problematic. I was in advertising for a while.
Right.
Then I was as a broker for a while. Then I was a teacher, but I was a teacher while I was a broker because I didn't want to stop teaching. I enjoyed teaching.
Right.
And then I became a professor. And then finally, I became a writer.
Were you always writing during that
I was
time?
always writing, but it was hopeless writing, the kind that everybody does. I'm going to write a poem. I'm going to write this. I'm going to write about my life. Page 2, you're already abandoning it.
So what was your first book that you wrote?
Well, the first book that I wrote back when I was 21.
Right.
And it was called A Christmas Carol. But it was, you know, I think somebody else used that title. But it wasn't really about a bad guy turning good or whatever.
Right.
It was more about two people meeting at a party. And it's a subject that I've taken up years and years later.
Right.
But the first book I published was Out of Egypt.
Right, which is a great book. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of that book. I mean, I think it's such an unusual and it's beautifully told, you know, but a story that people don't know about, you know, people being exiled, you know, from Egypt. And it's done with, you know, humor, and it's moving, and the characters are so vibrant. You know, they just kind of come off the page and like grab you, especially the beginning of the book.
I know, and basically I thought the beginning was kind of weak.
You did. You were wrong.
But I'm always wrong. That's the problem with me, is that, you know, I said, this sounds like something that Dickens would have written.
Well, it has, but
it doesn't feel like Dickens.
No,
eventually I kind of accepted the fact that, gee, I thought I was writing more like Proust, and here I am writing more like Dickens.
Yeah.
And they couldn't be more so antipodes of each other, you know?
So did people in your family read the book?
Yeah, my mother couldn't read it because she just said it's too complicated. There's too many characters. So, but she could read my essays, and she said, you said that in the essay. So she was a cautious reader.
Right.
My father said, you made me look like a terrible man. I said, you weren't that terrible. But he said, I was mean to you. I said, well, yeah, you were.
I don't remember that as much in that book. And then that story is continued in your previous book, which is your year in Italy.
Yes,
right?
Roman Year.
Roman Year, yeah, which is a beautiful book. And I was really thankful to continue your journey, which has been a very long journey. And how many languages do you speak?
I speak 3 quite well. The other 2, Spanish, I sort of know because you're in New York, you know.
Right.
Let's face it, it's the dominant language in New York, especially where I live. But the other language is Arabic. I speak Arabic. I still can speak Arabic fluently.
Right.
And I think I have a right accent only in Arabic.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But because I don't have an accent in English, I have a weird accent in English, a weird accent in Italian, and a certainly weird accent in French. But Arabic, I can speak normally.
Normally. So I've never read, I don't know, the last story is based on a 17th century novel, The Portuguese Letters.
Yes.
Is that originally, it's written in Portuguese?
No.
No, it's not.
No. It's written by a French man.
Who's writing as a nun?
As he's writing as a nun, and he's a French diplomat who ends up being basically the biggest diplomat in the court in Turkey.
I see.
But he's just a very social person, and he writes about this woman who's been abandoned as a nun and who's probably going to end up pretty badly, because the choices left for a girl who misbehaves because she's got a lover as a nun is pretty severe punishment.
And is it something that you taught also?
I taught it because I think it is an amazing book. It's published in 1669. Wow. And so you would think, okay, come on, but no, it's a very serious book. It's very, very short. It's 5 small chapters, that's all it is. And what it does do, however, it's you see this nun and you watch her think through, in her feverish state, through every conceivable outcome that she might have. And she is extremely lucid about herself and what she feels. This is something that you seldom see. Characters so cautious and very discreet about what they feel. And she is. And even Madame de Sévigné, who's the best known writer of letters, was never that close to the psychology of a woman who's in trouble.
It reminded me of the Cocteau
Yes.
Human Voice. Reading it, and it's really gripping, and you really feel like. Is it an adaptation, or is it completely reimagined?
It's reimagined, but
right,
it's
which is what it feels like.
Yeah, it's totally imagined. So, but I certainly was inspired by that story. It's about a girl who happens to come from, Michigan or whatever, somewhere in the Midwest, and she comes to Italy, and she's in this pension, and she's. It's a foundation pension, whatever, and she meets this guy on the first night,
right?
And he seduces her right there,
right,
very easily, and she says she knows he's lying to her.
Right.
She can tell he's a liar,
right?
But it doesn't matter. She likes him. She wants more of him, and he doesn't care.
Wow, it's really gripping. I was reading it, and then I said, I have to read it out loud. That's, some of it, just to see how, how it would fit in a person's mouth.
Yeah.
And you really capture that moment of, youth, and the complicated feelings.
Yeah.
You can, but it's about you more than him. Obviously, it's about her more than the guy, and
yes.
It's about all the things that are going on, this volcano inside of her.
She's got a volcano inside of her. That's very well said, because she knows she's feverish about him, and she shouldn't be.
Right.
And she knows that too.
Right.
And she's very conflicted, but she's drawn to him, and at some point, they even become sort of friendly. And
right.
She says, "Do you want to come upstairs?" And he says, "No, I can't."
Right. No, it's really interesting, because the other guys that she gets involved with they are very caring and sweet, and she's completely turned off by that.
It's not going to work.
Yeah, it's not going to work. She wants to be in this kind of relationship.
Yeah.
No, I was really floored, that is that something that, to get in touch with something like that, is that quite difficult for you, or is it freeing for you?
It is. Well, maybe it's freeing, but I put myself in very different situations all the time. Eventually, I sound the same. You can tell that this is a story by me, but I'm always projecting myself into a state of mind, into a character that I've never known, that I've never been in that way. So I enjoy that projection, because it frees me to be that person for a while. But it's very similar to an actor. It's what you do.
Well, certainly you can, transfer.
Yes.
You can fly somewhere else and get away from your responsible self, and the self that you would do these
responsible
things.
self. Okay.
Yes, and it's freeing in many ways, because we all have multiple,
Identities?
Yes, people inside of us.
I always think that we have many identities, like too many, and that some refuse to speak to the other. So you basically have one identity that will have, no, I won't touch this one. And you have this kind of, and we are torn by many, many things. And in one day, you can be individual A, individual B, and if you go to teach a class or you're having drinks with a friend, you're another individual. And you're always different.
Right. Is it something like when you write these things, do you come out of it like saying, well, I don't want to leave it in a way? You know, I want to stay there a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Or do you feel like, okay, I'm done with that. I don't want to see that anymore?
No, because you will notice that nothing I've ever written ends. It just, nothing I write has an ending that you say, okay, that was the ending. It is always feels like, huh?
Well, that's like life.
It's like life. It's very much like life. Although you think that a work of fiction should not exactly be like life. It has its own rigors and its own stylization and whatever. But at the same time, nothing I like, I don't like endings that are pat, because life is not like that. And my experience in life has been exactly the opposite. Nothing is pat. Nothing is rigorously there.
Are you because so many of your stories deal with the human connection, you know, the need to connect, you know, physically, emotionally, and the fragility of that, and also sometimes the contradiction of that relationship. And that's you know, not that many people really are interested in that, and it's something that really is really strong throughout your work, that even if it's a father and a son, you know, wanting to connect, you know, in this way, because I always think that's sort of one of the miracles of life, that actually people do connect.
Yes, it's I think the foundation of any form of intimacy.
Right.
It's, if you don't have, I mean, basically we all seek intimacy in one way or another. It could be a 1 hour intimacy, it could be a 3-day intimacy, it could be a lifelong intimacy. You want intimacy all the time, and you want it with not just one person, but with many people. Right. And I'm that way. I want to be intimate. It doesn't matter if it lasts, you know, the time of a coffee or whatever. As long as there's intimacy, there's closeness, and that's the most wonderful thing in life. And especially with somebody else that you are intimate with, that's also a serious privilege.
Was the story, the middle story in the jury, on jury duty, was that inspired by anything? I mean, obviously, I thought of a few other like films, that sort of Brief Encounter.
Oh, Brief Encounter is beautiful.
Yeah, and I loved that they would say, I won't give it away, but you know, let's. Hopefully, I can meet you tomorrow. You know, and the whole idea of sharing a specific, you know, espresso and a pastry, you know, was this. I mean, that's a big thing in a lot of your writing, is food, the sharing of food.
Sharing of food. I see, I'm not a foodie,
right?
And I have no patience with somebody explaining to me what they cooked last night.
Right.
And people want to tell me, people want to tell me their dreams. I don't want to know their dreams.
Why don't you want to know their dream?
Because it's boring.
Yes.
You know, because it has no rational plot line, and it's a dream. Don't do this to me, okay?
Right. So yes. I'm not going to tell you any of my dreams.
But it's more like you asked me a question. What is it that I don't like? Food. There's food.
There's usually food. It's part of the mise en scène.
But you know what? You're from Italy. You know, you've grown up in an Italian household. Food is a way of connecting with people.
Right. That's right.
And you have food on the table. It doesn't matter what kind of food it is.
Right. Well, if it's bad, that's a whole different thing. Well, there's not enough.
Oh, there's not enough.
I went out with a girl once, and the parents fed me, and there was not enough food.
What did you do to the girl?
I was out. I was like, you know, she's not Italian, she's not Jewish, she's not black. This doesn't work.
It's not good.
Not Spanish. It's not. Yeah. But I do think it doesn't have to be fancy, but it has to be good. And done with a certain kind of presentation.
Well, you know, if you think of my mother, my grandmother,
Right.
and I mean, these were women who were very, very strong,
Right.
very strong personalities. But at the same time, they cooked every single day.
Yeah.
And they got the food was out there, and they took it seriously. It was not something that they sort of improvised on the spot.
No.
And so the food became an important part, and it was also a way for the family to be together.
Right.
We never sat at a table for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't rush through breakfast, you don't rush through lunch, or certainly you don't rush through dinner. Dinner is an event.
Yes.
And that's what it was for me, and,
You're right.
and I've always liked that.
Are there certain kinds of, you know, I mean, obviously, I know there's writers that you love that have been really influential on you. I mean, if you had to name a couple of them, or
Yeah.
you don't really want to get into that. No.
No, I do, but
That have been like an influence, or you say, oh, I know I can't write like them. I can only write like I write.
Yeah.
But it's someone that you go back to.
I do go back, and I mean, there are certain writers that I have always taken very seriously because I cannot do what they're doing. For example, Dostoevsky's one, and I've reread all of Dostoevsky recently, and it's
In what language?
in Italian.
Yeah, why? Perché?
Because I read it in English the first time.
Right.
I figured, let's do it in Italian this time.
It's closer to the Russian anyway.
Who knows?
Well,
I don't know Russian, so I wouldn't know.
Right.
But it was wonderful. But essentially, he understands shame. He understands spite, which for me spite is part of everything that we do. We don't admit it. It's a secret, but it's there. And pity. Pity is another one that, no, don't have any pity on me. You know, but that's false, because in essence, pity is a very powerful emotion. And so I think that he understands these emotions very well.
Right.
The other author is Stendhal, whom I do love a lot. And the other thing about Stendhal is that he's also very intelligent. And I don't like stupid writers.
like who?
No.
No, we're trying not to get into trouble over here. Let's see what else I have. Other stuff. Yeah, that thing. And what about filmmakers? Are there filmmakers that
there's a couple of filmmakers that I have really adored. I mean, Fellini, Visconti, of course.
Right.
That they're fantastic in what they've done.
I could see Visconti adapting one of your books.
I could see it too, but I think he's not here any longer.
No, but I could see it. Yes.
But he's he's very good about those things. And Fellini is too, and I have to say, and I like Renoir also. But my favorite one is still Éric Rohmer. And Éric Rohmer, My Night at Maud's, Chloe's Knee, Love in the Afternoon, or whatever it's called in English. These are fantastic movies. And for me, because they go under the skin, they are very much analytical in their approach. And that is something that I try to do in my prose, is always analyze a character. Never leave a character unanalyzed.
I see. And how do you feel about, adaptations of your work without, naming favorites and stuff? I'm just saying because I've worked on a lot of adaptations as a actor, sometimes as a director, and it can be very, very frustrating because you want to take liberties, but you also want to maintain the writer's voice and sensibility.
Yes, but what if your voice and your sensibility, yours, is better than the writer's?
If it's a good writer, I haven't really encountered that so much.
Okay.
No, I've counted the exact opposite of that.
Bad writers?
Well, just say, for example, someone like Nabokov. He's got there's this black humor that goes underneath, and if you don't understand that, then you don't really understand a big part of his approach.
I agree with that. But I think adaptations are fantastic. I was lucky. I mean, somebody did an adaptation of my book, and
Right.
it worked wonderfully. I
Right.
think and what he did is that he maintained Luca Guadagnino.
Right.
He maintained the many pages were taken basically off the book. So that was it was good for me because I could recognize the movie. And then in the father-son scene, that was taken out of my book. Exactly.
Right. Right.
So I think
Yeah.
you've all seen that scene, okay.
Okay. Right.
We're not going to talk about the peach then, okay?
No. No, I think that was more Luca, maybe. Yeah. I think he would, he'd take credit for that, or blame, whatever you want to say. So yeah, but you've had other things optioned, I'm sure, or.
Yes, there are things going
Right.
on, and they're
Right.
constantly going on.
But you're not usually involved in that.
I try not to be.
Right.
My philosophy is very simple. I've had my say. It's up to you to have your say.
Right.
And
Right.
if our says are different, that's fine. It's your turn.
Yeah, I mean, it is another form.
It's totally a different form.
It is.
It is a totally different form.
Right.
And it has requirements that are totally unmanageable in prose. And the same thing happens in film. There are certain things that happen in prose that you can't do in film.
That's exactly right.
So you have to find sort of a way of via media.
Yes, yeah. So, is there something now that you're thinking of? I don't want to be like Audible and ask you, what are you writing? What are you doing now?
No, I'm trying to finish a novel.
Oh.
That's what I'm doing. And I don't want to talk about it.
No, don't talk about it.
Because you never know,
No, that's not a good thing to.
And I'm
talk
very superstitious.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's.
in that respect, I'm from the Middle East and from Italy. So
Right. No, you don't want to. No,
No.
you can't. You can't talk about
No.
it. So I know there's going to be questions and stuff. So I want to leave time for that. I don't know if they're going to bring them up.
I was going to read
Not.
something.
Oh yes, that's right.
No.
I forgot that. Yes. Okay, this is from the story that. Which one is this? Is the jury?
It's the jury one, but it's the very end of the jury one.
It's
And
the one.
this is yours.
Yeah, that's mine. Okay.
And
I think I asked you all my.
are we past the point?
No, you can read. You have time.
Okay, fine. That's what you say. Fine.
You're good.
No, but this is a scene that came to me. I'm always thinking of James. How many of you have read James Joyce's The Dead?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
That's a.
It's one of the best. It's probably the best short story ever written in English, and I love it. I do love it. And but I always think that James Joyce had no idea that he was going to end up with a walk in the snow, and that the snow was going to be visible from the window of the hotel. I always thought that this came to him at the last moment.
It feels like there's a spontaneity to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do the same thing. Basically, I didn't know how I was going to end this story. And so she asks him at some point, this is the psychologist who is in her middle 60s asking the lawyer who is in his middle 60s also.
And this is their like fifth day together, I think.
It's
the last day.
The last day before they decide that maybe they should travel to Naples.
Right.
And she asks him basically.
And they're both married.
Yeah, they're two other people.
Right.
Okay.
Not so happily. So.
Yeah. So she says, so tell me about your mother from Naples. And he says, my mother, he began. And right away, as they dipped their toes in the water, they knew that their walk would last a long, leisurely while. He started telling her of the war years, when his father was stationed in Naples and had met a local girl recently hired by the U.S. Army base. She knew just enough to be asked to stand in for one of the typists who was sick that week, but he was struck by the way she stared at the giant Remington that they had placed before her. She right away confessed that she had never seen the letters K, X, and W. They discussed the matter for a short while, When she finally raised her eyes, her darting eyes, to tell him that Italian didn't have these letters, he knew immediately that those startled, dark eyes of hers could stop army trucks in their tracks. Still with the typewriters before her and both her girlish thin hands resting delicately on her lap, she turned and said, "Captain Wadsworth, what would you have me type now?" He'd frequently tell the story of how they met and how she asked him what she should type. All he could think of saying to her right then and there was, "I've fallen in love with you, and I don't even know your name." Her chilling response as she put the cover back on the typewriter, determined to walk out of the office, was simply, "Un altro," another one. He persuaded her to stay for the day. Then she stayed for a week. And then, fearing he'd never see her again, now that the person who'd been sick said she was coming back the following week, he did something so bold that he knew one way or another it would change his life. He asked her to invite him to her parents' house for dinner. He would find everything they'd need and more at the PX. "But I have to ask my parents," she said. "As long as there's not another reason to say no," he ventured. "There is no other reason," she replied. It was the first time that he saw her smile. He was never the same again. When she was with her mother in the kitchen, he overheard her singing a song with a low voice, and while her father was speaking to him in the dining room, he couldn't focus on a single word the old man was saying. He stood up, apologized for leaving the room, and walked on tiptoes, headed to the kitchen. He waited by the door for her to finish the song. When she was done singing, he asked her the name of the song. "Dicitecelo voi," she said, as though asking, what else could it be but that? Would she please sing it again for him? "What, the song?" she asked, totally surprised by so simple a request. "Yes, the song." And once she started to sing it again, she kept staring at him so intensely that he had no recourse but to start tearing up in front of her and her parents. "It was my gift," she said, when he stood at her door and was about to leave long after dinner. "Can I come tomorrow?" he asked, knowing it was totally out of the place to ask. She did not say yes. She said, "A domani," until tomorrow. It changed his life. Over the years, he'd still ask her to sing. She would sing for him softly in their bedroom. She sang on every Bond's birthday. She sang for him when he was dying, because he wanted to hear her voice one last time. Well,
Wow.
the reason why I wrote this is because it was my way of getting out of the story, of finishing it, or at least trying to finish it. And this woman came up in my imagination.
But it goes on a little bit after that.
Yeah, it goes on a bit.
But
Yeah,
but that's like the crux of the matter. That's great, beautiful. I thought that was a very unusual, covering these two people's lives.
Yes.
Over these days, and these things do happen. They occur. There are these connections.
Yes.
That happen, and it does open. She is reading a book, and he does ask her, what are you reading?
Yeah.
And
she said, "Okay, I'm reading, Wuthering Heights."
Right.
And he said, "Oh, there used to be a joke about Wuthering Heights when I was a kid. It was Weather and Heights."
Right.
And he thinks it's funny, and she doesn't think it's funny at all.
Yeah. So, do we have some questions? Some cards that that I will ask and read? Okay. All right. How does writing about love change for you as you grow older? You want me to answer that for you? No.
Yeah, but I'm too old for that question.
Well, I mean, it's if you read Mariana,
Yes.
the last story, you would never, if you didn't know André, I don't think you would know, the age of the writer.
No.
At all.
But you have to write. Basically, that's what projecting yourself into the characters is all about. You can write about people who are in their middle 60s. That should be easy. But I've written about people who are 17.
Well, you still have that very much alive.
Yes.
In you.
And I can still write about
Yes.
17-year-old love, 18-year-old love,
Right.
20-year-old love, as I'm doing in my next book.
Right. Well, I was reading Mariana. I was exhausted by what she was going through. I was thinking, oh my God, this is, so I think that's a very good answer, okay? What continues to draw you to Italy?
It's a good question. I think that when I think of Italy as a writer, not as a human being, as a writer, I think of the beaches, I think of skin, usually tanned at some point. I think of women, I think of food, I think of drink, and I think of lovely evenings in Italy. And there's always a beach nearby, or at least there's a fountain that makes me think that there's a beach nearby, which is fine, I don't need to concrete things. But I love the fact that in Italy, life is a pleasure. You seek pleasure and you're not ashamed of seeking it, which is unusual because we Americans, we like our vacations, we like to go places, we like pleasure, we like to enjoy ourselves, etc., etc. But somehow it is rooted in the Italian experience. And it's not that it's part of what I am really, but I look at it and I say, my God, they know how to live life. And I don't know that I've ever known how to live life.
Well, I sometimes think there's so many different elements in the continent of Italy.
Yes.
There's so many different kinds of people who have been forced to go there, who have gone there, have invaded, have, ruled there, and eventually, I guess in Naples they say, they came, they invaded us, they raped us, they did everything, but in the end, they left, they were more Neapolitan than us. And we absorbed them.
Yeah, you always absorb them, yes.
Yeah, and they have this, it's very different in different parts of Italy.
It is, especially as you move to the north,
Yeah.
it's more sequestered, it's more uniform. But in Naples and in Sicily, you're dealing with history that you can touch the history because it's part of who they are. The blonde people are not really blonde, but they're blonde because their ancestors were blonde,
Yes.
And you go on, and you always marvel at what their life is like. And even the poor, the very, very poor people, somehow on Sundays at 1 o'clock, you go to Italy and you see that every household is celebrating something Sunday-ish. A Sunday dinner, a Sunday lunch actually, which lasts hours. It's wonderful, it's wonderful. I don't know that I have the stamina for those long lunches, but I do love them.
Right, okay. And then anyway, he answered about the next project. He can't speak about that, okay? How do you know for sure you are someone's secret romantic obsession?
Oh, I am somebody's obsession.
No, but this is the question. How do you know for sure you are someone's secret romantic obsession?
Well, if you think about it, how many of us have had romantic secret obsessions ourselves?
Right.
And it only makes sense that somebody else might think of you in that way as well. In other words, you're not a total reject. Put it this way.
Right. But asking them directly is out of the question.
No, you wouldn't.
Then it's not a secret.
Nobody has asked me anything.
Yeah.
You're my secret obsession.
Yes.
I wanted you all my life.
Yeah,
no, they never
no.
said that to me.
Yeah, no.
I wish they would, but it's,
But I don't think that would be so good.
No, it was-
You
it
want
was-
to feel that, don't you? You want
Then
to.
it becomes an obligation.
Yes. Well, haven't you had like imaginary relationships just by looking
Yes.
at someone? You're like, oh my God, this was, it's a whole relationship in 5 minutes.
Yeah, in
You know.
less than 5 minutes.
Less than 5 minutes.
Because they get off the. Basically, it happened
Off
to
the
me
train.
when I was on the train for once on a
Right.
train, and sat next to me a woman with a dog, and of course she was wonderful. She was wonderful to talk to,
Right.
but then she got off the train, and I said I'm going to write about her,
Right.
and I did.
Right. So there you go. Okay. That you gave. What continues? Wait. Andre, do you have a strict writing schedule or rules for yourself as a writer?
No, I wish I did.
Do
Because
you like ride your bike first and before you write, or you ride your bike afterward?
No, there's no such thing as I have no schedule. I mean, if I'm free, I do many things as well, as writing, but if I'm free, I will write. That's usually what I do, is whenever I have 5, 10, maybe an hour or two of free time, I will write. But otherwise, I will ride my bike, I will listen to a book, or whatever. I do many things, but I don't have a schedule. I wish I did. There are some writers who get up in the morning and go to write, and they do that. I don't have that discipline.
You don't do that. Okay. All right. So
I wish I did, but
Right. But do you still teach? You still,
I will
Right.
teach again. Yes.
now, could we talk about this with some book that you taught but that you never read?
Oh.
I thought
Yes.
that was really interesting, because I think, that's like not seeing a movie and then you write a review.
Haven't you done?
Sometimes that's how it feels. Sometimes,
Yes, I did.
Yes.
I did teach
But
it.
I think that's fascinating. That's the reason. I didn't mean to out you.
It's fine. Okay, but
We don't have to say what book it was.
oh, come on, there's of no use if it's not a book.
Yes, okay, it's a book by.
Vladimir Nabokov.
Okay, yeah.
And
I just didn't want to read it.
I began it, of course, because that was a book that I was teaching. And I said,
But you saw the movie.
I had seen the movie years before.
Okay.
So it didn't even count. The movie didn't help me, but I read the first few pages, and I said, no, I cannot read this. And so I put it aside. And the next thing I knew, I had to teach it. I said, well, I'm going to teach it. And because I'm a good teacher, I taught it very, very economically, but I studied certain points, I made the points, the class discussed the topic, I picked up on their discussion and gave them back my view, and so on. And it was wonderful. 2 hours on Lolita.
It was just 2 hours.
It was 2 hours, yes.
Okay, so that was, you didn't have to do it the following week?
No.
Oh, I see.
That was it.
Okay.
That was it. Because
Okay.
then it would be a BS.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, right. Okay, all right. It was only one session. Okay. So
That's right. But it was 2 hours.
Yes. I think that's very admirable in some ways. For me, when will I go back to Napoli? As soon as possible. So, okay. Okay. Walk us through the process of getting into a character's mind.
You have to want to do it, first of all. For example, let me give you an example of Elio and Oliver, which is sort of the foundation. Oliver is a character that I cannot understand. Mm-hmm. I describe him, I get into his motives, whatever, but I don't really understand him. I do understand Elio, on the other hand, because he's exactly the kind of person, the kind of sensibility, the kind of ruminations that he goes through. These are things that I've done, so I understand that. But eventually, when I write from the point of view of a woman, as in Mariana, for example, that story in this book, I find that even I can even enter into her mind. And I want to, because I want to always experiment with what it is that somebody else is going to be like. But I have to be interested in them. If I'm not interested
in their situation or their particularity,
whatever it is that makes them
right,
viable as characters, I have to want to know them better. And if they're not interested, for example, Lolita is a totally uninteresting thing, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
But there are certain characters, for example, what's her name? I forget her name. The name of the character. Elizabeth Bennet. Okay, how many of you know Elizabeth Bennet? Okay, all right. Okay, it's Pride and Prejudice. Okay, right. Now Elizabeth Bennet is a very intelligent character, and I think that Jane Austen is also extremely interesting and very intelligent. So I like that. I would love to write a story about Elizabeth Bennet because she's attractive. She's attractive to me. I want to know her better.
I see. And can you tell when that's happening? You say, "Well, I know that I'm connected to that. I'm not even thinking."
You don't have to think. You just
right.
keep writing in their voice. Yes.
That's right.
I do know that. Yeah.
Right. So
and it's a wonderful moment that comes to a writer when you suddenly feel that you've got the character. You're in their skin. You're feeling what they feel. And that's not the case for many of the characters that exist in books that I can't emote for them. I don't understand them. I understand, for example, the character of Raskolnikov who kills 2 women. I understand his lethargy inside of him. I understand him.
What about the character in Notes from an Underground?
Oh, that's me. Are you kidding?
I'm a mean man.
I know.
Something wrong with my liver.
Yes, my tooth.
My tooth, yeah.
That's definite. Yes, I totally understand that character, yeah.
Right.
And I love to understand characters because that means that I'm connecting with the author.
Right. And you're kind of getting out of yourself. You're plugging in, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's what I always think when I work with someone and you connect with them. You're sort of plugging into their brain in a way.
Whatever it is that they have, whatever,
right.
You're plugging in.
Right.
And it's a wonderful moment for a writer to be able to find that this character that I'm creating is viable.
Right. Well, Mariana, personally, I mean, that's you plugged into that. So, yeah, that was. Do you want to read anything from that?
No.
Okay. No. All right. Okay. No. Too embarrassing. Don't. Okay. All right. I think that's
it. That's perfect.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.